They probably won't like that to hear it. But anyway, I'm here to invite you to the Queendom of Heaven. You say Queendom? Well, I should say Queen/Kingdom of Heaven. Most people would think, well, let's see, you want us to die so we can go to heaven? And the way I look at it is that on earth as it is in heaven is happening right here. And you probably hear a dumb telephone going off now, which that's just the way it goes. So anyway, Aldous Huxley, a philosopher and a guy who did a lot of LSD back in the days before anybody was doing LSD, came up with the thought that the kingdom of heaven that Jesus talks about is really the meditative state of bliss. And I thought that was very interesting. And that would fit in with his supposed statement, the kingdom of heaven is at hand, right here, right now, and on earth as it is in heaven, in that prayer that he gave to humanity. I myself am not religious. I have no faith or belief, but I think a lot of the positive statements of Jesus happen to overlap with many philosophical systems about how humans can live in the best and most beautiful way. So we come into the world as little babies, tripping our brains out on psychedelics. And those psychedelics basically are dimethyltryptamine, harmine compounds, beta-carbolines, and cannabinoid, and a slew of neuropeptides. We arrive here with everything we need. We're breathing abdominally, which is the healthiest way to breathe. We are undifferentiated, and what I mean by that is there is nothing separate to us. We are experiencing the all, undifferentiated, and that could be compared to nirvana. You might even say that we arrive here in the Queen/Kingdom of Heaven.
So then what do you see as the reason for our departure from that, or like separation into our own identity?
Yes, our departure from this Queen/Kingdom of Heaven starts when we start getting educated. So depending on what cultures that we live in, if we live in a culture that, say, takes advantage of nature, a culture that requires you to struggle to even live and compete against everybody else, a culture that tells you to do things that are opposite, like just a simple example, go to high school and graduate and then go to college, and that's how you start off to have a good life. Well, that's part of the whole struggle of fighting to overcome the surround, the threatening surround, the threatening. So we get taught, at least in this culture, that life is threatening. Now, if you were in Canada or in Denmark or in a lot of the countries where you don't have to struggle to survive, where there are no starving people, where you don't have to pay to live in this country, if you happen to have some kind of terminal disease, well, that's just tough luck. Do you have enough money? Oh, you have health care. Oh, well, the health care only pays for a small amount of this, so we'll need your house too. Now, being raised in a culture like that from a tiny little kid, you get this feeling of impending doom, even if you're loved by your mommy and daddy and family or whatever. The culture gives you that feeling of impending doom. And what that does to your consciousness is take you away from what I'm talking about as the Queen/Kingdom of Heaven, the state of bliss, joy, excitement, beauty, experimentation, just a big dance of joy and love, really, as a life. And it's quite possible to live a life like that.
So how do we do that? How do we return to that state?
Well, it would be easy to live a life like that if we weren't taught the things that we're taught that take us away from that. So what a lot of the things that I have to relate to, and by choice, since I've been 19 and had what I would call, I guess, a rebirth experience, or what Carl Jung would call personality integration, which is a transcendental experience that takes you beyond the suicide that you're ready to commit and into a world where your troubles associated with the reasons for killing yourself just aren't there. And when you experience that world, you go, oh, what a relief this is. Oh, it feels so wonderful here. I don't think I have to kill myself. In fact, if I move along in this particular world, I find beautiful things that I could have found if I wasn't educated and influenced by the society and family structures to want to kill myself. And once I run into this beautiful world, if I follow my inner guidance, what I call inner guidance, which to me, the way I share that with people is, it's kind of like insects and birds being able to fly 1,000 miles to a particular place because they have a guidance system. I think each of us has an inner guidance system that can guide us through our lives, just like a bird or insects flying a few thousand miles to a particular spot. And this inner guidance system associates with feeling beautiful, with awesomeness, being like a little baby looking at the surround, with a lot of love, with playfulness, with a spontaneity that's very creative, that doesn't have to think real hard about what I'm going to do next or how I'm going to survive or anything like that. So even if you live in a threatening culture, it's possible to actually be guided along in your life, bypassing the terrible things of that culture, by actually giving yourself opportunities to feel beautiful. Why would I give myself opportunities to feel beautiful? Well, some people don't think they deserve it. Or other people might say, well, all this stuff you're talking about, the Queen/Kingdom of Heaven, is just a bunch of bullshit, and it's just a faith game you're throwing at people, but actually it's not a faith game I'm throwing at people. Everything that I share is pretty much based on science and experimentation. And it's very similar to Advaita Vedanta, which has Brahman as the creator and Atman as that individuated out creator at the center of consciousness of each living entity. The problem with Advaita Vedanta is after they say that your I am, which is the Atman that each living thing is experiencing looking out on the surround, that after they say, well, okay, you're unified with all of that. You're unified with Brahman because your I am is really an individuation of the center of the universe. But there's a problem. In order to really experience this, you have to get rid of your ego. Now, I have a problem with that. First of all, I don't even know what ego is. I think it's an invention. But I think what they mean by ego is your identity. And what that relates back to that I was talking about earlier is you arrive here in nirvana and then you're educated. You're told who you are, where you live. I'm so-and-so, I live here, I do this is my career, blah, blah, blah. And we really start believing that that's who we are. But really, we are something way beyond these cultural identities that have been given to us. Nevertheless, I would not want to get rid of my identity. So to me, Advaita Vedanta has a problem in wanting to get rid of identity. Who doesn't have a problem with that is a lot of the teachings of Jesus And I have trouble bringing that up because when I say that, people are thinking of Christianity and the Bible and all of that, which I think are an insult to Jesus. But that same consciousness can be experienced without even referring to Jesus. And by really, I guess what I try to share with people is who you are. So I would ask you, where are you? It's one of the first things I would ask you. And you say, well, what do you mean? I'm right here. I said, well, I see your face, I see your hands, I see your body, but where are you? Well, I'm right here. Oh, I see your body, but is that you? So that question redounds to what is consciousness. They have never been able to locate a seat of consciousness in our bodies. They've looked around, they can't find it. There's nobody home. So this consciousness is a very mysterious thing. We know that when we so-called die, our biophotons, which biophotons are with anything that is alive, when those biophotons leave, we're so-called dead. And our consciousness is no longer there. Now, some people would say, well, does that mean that the consciousness disappears along with the biophotons into the quantum vacuum, where the biophotons are waving in and out all the time? Who knows? But what's really curious, I think, is this very quantum vacuum itself that some physicists call the spirit world. I don't know what that is, the spirit world. I'm into science, but what I do know is that the quantum vacuum has everything you could think of that relates to the spirit world, except maybe angels or stuff like that. But the quantum vacuum creates all things. It creates the atoms that form the molecules that form all the things that we can possibly see, including 10 trillion galaxies. So in that sense, the quantum vacuum is a potential of everything. Also, in that sense, I use the Big Bang Theory, which a lot of people are trying to beat up on now, to build a hypothesis of who we are. And the Big Bang Theory, everything comes from nothing, from a point, which is not a thing, and expands out into this whole universe of seemingly endless stuff. A point is not a thing. It's more of an idea. A point at the center of a sphere is not a thing. It's more of an idea. So if you hypothesize, say, a field of consciousness for your being, and you locate a point at the center of that field, then that point, which isn't a thing, is entangled with the point of the Big Bang. Now, what does that mean? Entangled with the point of the Big Bang. What that means to me is, I've heard people say, and some scientists say, you're looking out on the surround from the center of the universe. Well, that's interesting. I'm here standing on Earth. How can I be looking out on the surround from the center of the universe? Well, that point at the center of my consciousness isn't a thing, but it's the center of my consciousness. So I'm looking out on the surround from that center, and that center, since every point, they say, is the center of the universe, in a sense, each living thing is observing the surround from the center of the universe. So I use that to say that each one of us is entangled with a point that ends up creating the whole cosmos. And in that sense, each one of us is a holograph of the whole universe. Well, now, what does that do for me? I can give you a quick example of something that you can play with that might end up saying, well, maybe there is something to this. And I call this the 5-year-old's creation of the universe. So the little 5-year-old is starting his or her meditative experience, and they create this little game and say, well, I'm going to inhale from the ends of the universe to my Big Bang center of my consciousness, while my body expands out to fill the whole universe. So at the top of my inhale, I'm at my Big Bang center, but my body has spread out to fill the whole cosmos. So what that means is I'm observing this around from the center of the universe, and my subatomic particles and atoms are spread way out, filling the whole cosmos. That inhale was potential. I exhale back out from my Big Bang center towards the end of the universe as my body comes back home at the end of the universe. Mom, I just created the whole universe. Now, playing around with that little 5-year-old's game gives you a feeling of centeredness. That feeling of centeredness can be very valuable, especially if you have your stream of thoughts, your stream of thoughts includes every image that ever passed through your mind, everything you've ever done or will do. And if that stream of thought is unpleasant to you, if that stream of thought has you, say, wanting to commit suicide or whatever, and you experience this centeredness playing the 5-year-old's game, what happens is, as you're playing that game, you'll notice these thoughts crossing your mind maybe. But here I am playing this breathing game, and so I just mindfully notice these thoughts swirling around my center point, but at my center point everything is still. So if I experience this centeredness enough and mindfully allow all of my thoughts to exist, I will find them running across my mind here and there. If I'm ready to commit suicide, maybe a bunch of things running through there. But if I'm hanging out with that breathing, the terrible thoughts tend to start breaking up, and oh, here they come back again. And oh, there it goes downstream again. And as I do this, I notice that the incidents of the thoughts start getting further and further apart. And that lets me know something. That lets me know that if I experience this centeredness enough, I may very well experience a healing of my thought stream. And I've been involved in sharing stuff with 4 women, one who had terminal cancer, one who, the other 3 had 4th-stage cancer, and in playing around with this centeredness thing that I'm talking about, in addition to lots of Qigong that I teach, these women experienced healing of cancer, including the woman that was supposed to die in 1 month, which blew my mind. But how that relates to what I'm just talking about is, this centeredness is also very healing because it allows your thought streams to flow randomly, but in a way that these thought streams can start breaking up, at least the harmful thought streams. And since your DNA is passing all of your thoughts and emotions to your cells, that means that the DNA is passing those broken up thought streams to your cells in a much lesser way. And eventually, if you become free of the thought streams torturing you, that doesn't mean they're gone, because you can always bring them back up, like a song that you hear the first 2 notes and all of a sudden the song is playing. Well, my torture stream that might be causing me to kill myself, if I access it, it starts running and playing. Maybe not as strongly as it did when I was going to commit suicide, but all these thoughts are still there on the edge of your consciousness. That doesn't mean that we have to get rid of them, because if we try to get rid of them, we become entangled with them. But if we experience the center